The highly anticipated summer showdown between Jake Paul and Nate Diaz will take place. However, there are many individuals unfamiliar with MMA who claim that Nate is a weak opponent for Jake. They argue that he is old, and again, an MMA fighter. But in truth, Diaz possesses far more boxing skills than any influencer boxer. Now, the time has come to determine if Jake can overcome such a seasoned fighter. Nate Diaz. Upon first seeing Nate Diaz, many boxing fans would immediately dismiss him as ridiculous, merely flailing his arms and appearing sluggish and completely out of shape. However, things are not always as they seem. Everything that seems unrefined at first glance in the Diaz brothers' style is actually part of their unique fighting style. Although it's still peculiar, you can't argue with that. Take for instance Nate's arm waving, which may appear silly on the surface, yet in reality it is a well-established technique known as milling, originating from bare-knuckle boxing and expertly mastered by the Diaz brothers. Do you recall those photos of old fighters assuming peculiar stances? That's where this technique finds its origins. However, its essence lies not in a drunken brawl-like style, but rather in seizing the opponent, trapping and deflecting their strikes to prevent them from setting up a counterpunch, usually targeting the face. This is precisely what Nate has been achieving throughout his career. Most modern fighters tend to think of a guard as a passive thing, a defensive posture designed to absorb impact and minimize damager. But instead, this guard is more active. The hands are constantly in motion, disguising one's intentions and creating a complex web of movement that renders it challenging for a clean strike to find its target. It employs forearm blocking techniques that are now regarded as more Eastern in style. This practice of maintaining constant hand motion is known as milling, presumably because the motion resembles the rotation of a windmill's sails. Beyond its defensive advantages, milling also presents numerous opportunities for feints. For instance, Canelo Alvarez utilized it against Alfredo Angulo, leading the referee to stop the fight. Canelo extended his right hand to the side, causing Angulo to believe a right hand was coming his way. Consequently, Angulo ducked behind his gloves, leaving him vulnerable to the real punch. This brings us to Nate's primary weapon, the 1-2 combination. Every opponent who faced Nate wore a stunned expression on their face, seemingly questioning, am I genuinely being struck by the same combination, the exact combination I had prepared for and knew was imminent? Indeed, one cannot be fully prepared for Nate's 1-2. Joe Schilling even mentioned that Nate's 1-2 was so rapid that he would throw the straight punch before the jab even connected, catching everyone off guard. In addition to his speed, Nate capitalizes on his pawing jab. There exist various types of jabs, such as the stiff jab, the up jab, the flicker, and many others. However, the pawing jab finds its roots in old-school boxing. For instance, Thomas Hearns built his career around that punch. It serves as a smearing strike in itself, intended to disrupt the opponent's vision, maintain distance, and facilitate parries. This is precisely what Hearns did and what Diaz has been doing throughout his career. He throws the jab not to inflict damage, but rather to dictate the pace, disrupt his opponent, and set up his left hand for the opportune moment. As the fight progresses, he unleashes an increasing number of 1-2 combinations. Most of his victories have stemmed from these attacks in his stance. While Nate may not possess the knockout power to finish opponents with these strikes, the accumulated damage often coerces them into grappling, where Nate excels in submitting his opponents. Therefore, Nate may not boast a wide array of techniques, but he excels in his simplicity, reminiscent of Bruce Lee's quote about the man who practiced one strike 10,000 times. The only addition he made to his arsenal throughout his career is the lead hook, which further bolsters his 1-2 combinations. For instance, in his bout against McGregor, it enabled him to effortlessly counter McGregor's renowned left straight. While McGregor swung from his hips, Nate had already landed 3 blows. Nate's sole significant vulnerability has consistently been leg kicks. In his time, Dos Anjos simply targeted and chopped down his legs, and subsequent opponents attempted to exploit the same strategy. In truth, Nate has always seemed more suited to boxing than MMA. Even Andre Ward, with whom the Diaz brothers extensively trained, acknowledged that Nate prepared him for the toughest fights because there is no sparring partner more challenging than Nate.
A lot of work with those guys, and specifically Nate. At a certain point, I stopped working with Nick because he was doing other things, but Nate, man, and the volume and having to like deal with the awkwardness and the height and the reach and like that got me ready for Chad Dawson.
That's amazing.
That's my boy.
Yeah, he's a tough dude, man.
Additionally, Nate has always possessed exceptional clinch skills. However, in the fight against Jake, this aspect may not play a substantial role, since Paul will have the advantage in size, rendering Nate's clinch less effective. Nevertheless, when summarizing Nate's technique, it can be confidently affirmed that he is a technically proficient boxer, superior to Tommy Fury and, of course, Joe Fournier. But the question remains, what does Jake Paul bring to the table against him? Jake Paul. Jake's entire fighting style revolves around identifying openings in his opponent's defense and delivering powerful overhand punches. This approach proved successful in his knockouts of Askren and Woodley, deceiving them with his tactics and even drop Anderson Silva. In moments when Jake isn't pressing forward, he throws his left hook. Usually he follows it up with clinching to protect himself from excessive damage, which he often receives when throwing his left hook, as we saw in the fight against Woodley. This is how he compensates for his defensive vulnerabilities through clinching, a technique that often draws criticism. However, it works and works quite well. He constantly bends, almost crawls on the canvas, and does whatever it takes to avoid those straight punches. Then he returns with overhands. This way, he remains dangerous until the end of the fight, making it unwise to underestimate the man who defeated Anderson Silva. However, Jake's main challenge in the worst-case scenario for him in a fight would be an opponent who unleashes a flurry of rapid punches, precisely what Tommy Fury represented. Although people have already mocked Jake for his loss to Tommy, I believe he doesn't get enough credit. He took several rounds, dropped Tommy, and was generally effective. He constantly caught Fury with overhands during his jabs, and essentially didn't take any significant damage. The only reason for his defeat was the volume of attacks, specifically jabs. And as we have found out, that's precisely what Nate is preparing for Jake, and the situation looks very dangerous for him. Prediction. Finally, who will win? In any case, the fight will be close because Nate Diaz's defense is generally poor, and he misses a lot of strikes from any fighters. It won't be a significant accomplishment for Jake to land punches on Nate, but knocking him out is nearly impossible, unless he brings a baseball bat into the ring. The only thing that can hinder Diaz in this fight is his age and not living the best lifestyle. Additionally, all his techniques worked in MMA gloves, and let's not forget that fights with different gloves look completely different. But something tells me that even in his worst form, the old Diaz will have enough to defeat Paul. Jake will constantly press forward, trying to overwhelm Nate, but that's exactly what Diaz needs. He will pick up the pace with each round, wearing down Jake, who will be more tired than ever before by the end of the fight. Most likely, Paul will take the first 2 to 3 rounds, and starting from the 4th round, Diaz will control the fight at his own pace, eventually winning by decision. What do you think? Who will win, and how in this fight?